We're ready to go. So do you want to begin with all the explanations and so forth, Brian, and that you normally do to begin?
Yes, sir. Happy to. So I did hear that we started the recording, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Montgomery County MUD number 60 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021. I appreciate everyone being able to attend our remote meeting today. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through our remote meeting procedures and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our board of directors, Bob Lux.
Here.
Mike Wise.
Here.
Richard Stromat.
Present.
Betty Doherty.
Present.
Sandra George.
Here.
That completes the roll call for our directors. We'll move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy. Is Shelley in the meeting?
She is not.
Okay, I do not hear Shelley. Okay, any other members of Woodlands Water staff in the meeting?
Oh, she is.
Okay, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Aaron Schindelwolf.
Present.
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting?
This is Matt Corley.
Okay. Anyone else from the River Authority? If not, we'll move on to MUD 60 consultants. Do we have any MUD 60 consultants in the meeting? And members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well.
Arthur Budoff.
Zach Lowe.
Okay. Any other members of the public present in the meeting? Okay, Maureen, does that cover everyone who has dialed in or joined via video conference?
That is all I see.
Okay, that will complete the roll call. Bob, I'll hand it over to you to begin the agenda. Thank you. This
Bob
is
Lux,
Brian.
you're
Bob, you may
muted.
be on mute.
And I came out so eloquently, gee whiz. I want to begin with our invocation and a moment of reflection. Heavenly Father, we come to you today as an assembled body. We humbly request that you guide us to provide a spirit of welcome, to engage in respectful dialogue with wisdom, kindness, and humility for the common good of those we represent. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of allegiance to the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag.
Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to
to
Texas one state,
one
under
nation,
God,
under God,
one and
one and
indivisible.
indivisible.
Thank you. Okay, now receive moments of the public. We sincerely appreciate your comments and input. We do request that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Thank you. I guess the first in was Zach Lowe, I believe, and the second in was Paul Brown, and the third in was Arthur. Is that the way you saw it, Maureen? Is that the way you saw it?
I missed that.
The first in was Zach Lowe, second in was Paul Brown, and the third in was Arthur.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Paul and Zach kind of talked at the same time.
Okay. Zach, if you could please begin.
Thanks for the invitation, Bob, and the board. I just wanted to briefly comment on the TACUS internet provider that is now drilling in Cochran's Crossing in particular, and have a great deal of concern about the damage being caused by their activity. I understand that there are numerous incidents of water lines being broken. We've had at least 2 incidents I'm aware of gas lines being broken. And I think part of the issue seems to be the lack of coordination with the numerous subcontractors being used by this company. This company was only formed in 2000, at the end of the year in 2018. So they have 1 year of full service, and began up in the Conroe Lake area. And suddenly we have this startup company taking over a major role here in the Woodlands. And they are also working in Shenandoah, I understand, with now a roll up of maybe 60 employees. I just question whether or not they're going to be the service provider that the Woodlands community, as the #1 community in the country, would expect. Looking into the company, having obtained their certificate of operating authority by the State Utility Commission only, as I say, at the end of the year 2019, there are a great number of requirements for them to maintain that operating authority. And from the feedback that I've certainly gotten in the short term, they are not meeting those standards, and I highly question they would in the future. I just feel like that there needs to be a coordinated effort to address these, maintaining the requirements, maybe even having them provide a bond of all the damage that is being caused. I see that Mike Mooney is here, and maybe he could share more detailed information about the kind of things that I'm raising. They're just finishing up in my neighborhood, 4 great big holes in my front yard. I just am pleased that nothing has been broken here, although we had a water line broken on the parallel street from me yesterday. One neighbor thinks that the sewage line is broken. I don't know, or cracked. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I just heard that. But anyway, hopefully there can be some coordinated action by all of the MUDs to pressure our county leaders into some action at the state level, where it would make a difference if their operating authority were in jeopardy if they didn't clean up their act.
Thank you, Zach. I can, I think, speak for a number of folks here today that I have, even as late as yesterday afternoon, had another engagement with TACUS. It's maddening, to say the least. Thank you for your comments, Zach, and I'm sure that Mr. Mooney or Brian Yates, Attorney Yates, will have some input either immediately or shortly later in the meeting if you have the opportunity to stay. Second up is Paul Brown. Paul, if you would
Okay,
make your
Bob,
comments, please. Thank you.
thank you and your colleagues for having me. I've been living here in the Woodlands for 33 years. And the Woodlands is pushing 50 years old. And what I wanted to talk about really was infrastructure. Clearly, we're not building new houses here in any great abundance. And, we have an existing infrastructure. And that infrastructure is in process and has been in process, obviously, for maintenance. But it seems to me we're probably in process of ramping up, the replacement of existing infrastructure. Anyway, I recently saw a presentation, which I assume you guys saw, from San Jacinto. They gave us a year ago a 10-year project plan, and then they followed up with a deck just recently in March of 21 with lots of detail. When I look through this and I look at the broad array of things being discussed and that I'm becoming aware of seemingly every day, this only represents a portion of the improvements that need to be done over the next 10 years, or going to be done over the next 10 years. It's important to realize that according to San Jacinto, we've got, give or take, $1 billion of assets above ground and below ground. And if you take a look at the deck that they provide, you'll see that really the first 10 years only represents approaching 20% of that inventory. What I'd like to advocate for is that we create a rolling plan inside a process with committed funding, okay, beyond 1 year, outside of the current budget process. I'd also like to suggest, that it's entirely possible that a very significant portion of our customer billing is going to be substantially the cost of improvements or replacement, okay, mainly replacement. And I'd like to suggest that we consider, if we can budget longer term, that we basically break out the cost of infrastructure and identify that and parse it on a bill for customers on a go-forward basis, so that they can clearly see why their bills will be going up, which I would tend to think they probably will be going up. And it's not about our traditional water production. It's about the combination of current operating expense and replacement. And I think it's a valuable parsing if we can do it, because they'll know exactly what, or pretty exactly what they're spending their money on and why our bills are going up. I also think it's important for us to get a bigger perspective. We talk about the 200 million.
Paul, you're at 4 minutes. Could you wrap it when you get?
Yeah, I sure can.
Thanks.
We're looking at the 10-year plan, and I think that's important. I also think that there's a need to further socialize what's happening with infrastructure in the community with all of our MUD directors. And I'm not talking about Paul Brown. I'm talking about, the combination of management and our vendors, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Arthur,
Yes, sir. Mr. President,
nice
and
to hear from you. Good
it's
to, I
great.
wish I could see you.
well, it's great to be here, and I'm here for some public comments, but also to learn from Mud 60. So Bob, we appreciate your leadership as the president of Mud 60, and thank you for the time. In the interest of time, I'm here to make some comments on it's in your packet. It's dealing with Woodlands Water, May 13, 2020, Woodlands Water, Groundwater and Surface Water Committee report out to the trustees. When I was a trustee, I was the chairman of that committee, Groundwater Surface Water Committee, and we made 4 recommendations that the trustees approved. One of those recommendations is on an annual basis to review for budget time the ratio of groundwater to surface water. As you all may know, we're at a current 35% surface water and 65% groundwater. I'm here to lobby and ask the support of Mud 60 to have their trustee go to the April meeting and to support and vote on changing the budget from 65-35 to 50-50. And what that will achieve is to help regeneration of the aquifer and help to slow down subsidence. We all should have received a report by San Jacinto, which is an excellent report presented in December 2020 at the Woodlands Water trustee meeting called Static Well Levels from 2010 to 2020. And that report clearly demonstrates that when we were at 65% surface water and 50% surface water, the aquifers were recharging and subsidence was being mitigated. When we went to, in 2019, 2020, when we went to 35% surface water, we saw on the chart and the data shows us that the aquifers started to decrease and subsidence started to increase. And Ron Kelling and Jim will present more detail, but people, we have to know also what's the cost to our customer. So what the impact's going to be based upon financial year 21, it would increase an average user of 10,000 gallons, their bill by $2.31, moving their bill from approximately $28 to $31 a month. But that's based upon fiscal year 21. SJRA would have to come back to the board with revised numbers based upon their fiscal year 22-23. But I would ask the board to have their trustees support this initiative for not only for today's residents, but for our residents in the future. And it's another way we can work towards improving aquifers and reducing subsidence. Thank you for your time. Thank you, board, for your service.
Thank you, Arthur, for your insightful comments. Really, sincerely appreciated.
Thanks,
As
sir.
well as comments from Mr. Brown and Mr. Lowe. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's see, where are we? We are at the consent agenda. Just to refresh your memory, the consent agenda, if you have questions on any of the 8 items that are in the consent agenda, please bring them forward. They will be addressed and then we will vote on the entire group at one time. Are there any questions regarding the minutes of the February 21 Board of Directors meeting?
No comments?
No.
I have none. Okay. How about any questions regarding the financial report shown on pages 5 through 14? Maureen, my only question is just seems slightly out of tilt. I noticed that sewer revenue is down 25%, yet bulk sewer purchases are only are up 5%. That seems it seems peculiar to me.
Year to date, we made a correction for January. The actual billed sewer report was not correct, so I adjusted it for January. as well.
Thank you.
Probably why it's a little less this month. Those should even
Thank you.
out.
But remember, you are not collecting enough retail sewer revenue to offset your wholesale sewer expense.
Okay, that's right. Yep. I do remember that now, Jim. Thank you. Oops. Let's see, where the tax collectors report. Jeannie, you're laying the hammer down like every year. We're very well. You're right on target.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
We're doing good.
Anyone, congratulations on you and your team's diligent work.
Thank you.
Anybody have any further questions for Ms. Scott?
No questions?
Okay, moving along. Consider and act upon expenses for the district and Woodlands Water trustees. The things that I anticipate upcoming are attending GMA 14. As of today, I have no added request for attendance for any special meeting until our next meeting. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we'll move along to the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report. Are there any questions? Pages 16 through 20. I always like to read that section 2 wastewater data and not see any asterisks. That's always good, good sign to me, indicating that there's some E. coli overshot or something. So that's always good. I have no further questions. Anybody else? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Sandra George, I make a motion that we can, that we accept the consent agenda as read.
Lord have mercy.
Thank you, Sandra.
Director Stromat, second.
We have a motion and a second. I'd like to do a roll call vote, please. And that would be Director Lux, aye. Director Wise,
Aye.
Director Stromat,
Aye.
Director George,
Aye.
Director Doherty.
Aye.
Okay, we have that's completed. Now on to the regular agenda. Do we have any information update on agenda item number 9, Mike?
This is Mike Mooney. Nothing to update this month. Still status quo.
Okay. Agenda item 10. Do we have anything, Brian, that you want to report, please?
This is Brian. A couple of items. One, as I'm sure all of you know, the governor did lift the mandatory mask restrictions and the business restrictions effective as of last Wednesday, March the 10th. There were some questions as to whether that action by the governor impacted the disaster proclamation that he issued last year that suspended the in-person meeting requirements under the Texas Open Meetings Act. We have been in contact with the governor's office and have confirmed with the governor's office that the actions last week did not in any way modify the disaster proclamation that suspended the in-person meeting requirement. So we remain in a remote meeting environment for now. When that changes, we'll of course let everybody know. But did want to pass that along. Also, you should have received an email yesterday from Shelley that had a couple of documents attached. One was a clean version and the second was a red line identifying proposed modifications to our construction 10 or Con 10 policy for developer projects. There had been some discussion a few months back about taking a look at that policy, even though we only have a few districts that still have either active or upcoming developer-led projects. To go ahead and take a look at that for all the Woodlands MUD, since it's a uniform policy. The last time it was updated was in '95, so it has been a while. You'll see on the red line changes what the proposed modifications are. By and large, updating some of the requirements for the developer that were spelled out in the policy that really were just pulled from the statutory requirements, either in the administrative code or the water code. Wanted to more closely tie the provisions to the provisions in the CON-10 policy to the actual statutory language or the code reference language, so that when those codes are modified, which they inevitably are from time to time by the legislature, our policy would automatically pull in those modifications instead of having to do separate amendments to the policy whenever the legislature changed the code provision. So rearranged it to pull that information in. That's the main thrust of the revisions. Not asking for any action by the board today. This is just for review and discussion. We will plan to have an item on next month's agenda for each of the MUDs to consider approving the updated policy. So we'll have that for future developer projects. And I believe that's all I have of the attorney's report. Jim's going to cover under the GM report the TACUS issue and where we stand from an operational and potential litigation perspective. Of course, that discussion is somewhat limited in open session, but he's going to cover that item under his report. Happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
This is Director Lux. I have a question, Brian, about the potential for meeting in person, number one. And number two of that two-part question is, if we decide to meet in person, are we all in person, or can we have a mixture of Zoom and in person as it fits?
This is Brian. So I'll leave to Jim. The questions come up on the meeting earlier today about logistics and goals for meeting in person. But from a legal perspective, the question about can you kind of do it half one way and half the other, and the answer is it's one way or the other. So you're meeting in person. Let's just say MUD 60, not talk about the other Woodlands Water MUDs. Your meeting is held in person, or it's held remotely. Now you can arguably say that you're holding your meeting remotely, have all the login information, but you have a quorum of the directors physically present in a location, but it's not necessarily an in-person meeting. I think while the governor's disaster proclamation is in place, that could be possible. But in a normal meeting environment, when the disaster proclamation is not in place, then we're back in the requirement to be in person. But if for some reason you couldn't get a quorum in person, my recommendation would be we would continue to post our agendas as we have with all the dial-in information, but you could just happen to have quorum of your directors physically present, even though the meeting would technically be a remote meeting.
Thank you very much.
This is Mike Wise. I have a question for the attorney on that regarding the information on TACUS that Zach Lowe brought up. I was wondering if he has been hearing anything or any from the legal standpoint, because I can second it. They break gas lines. Everything I'm hearing is they're making a mess out of things. And also hearing they did the same thing up in Bentwater, and their response has been tough. Sue us. Yeah,
this is Brian. So just to go ahead under the attorney's report and touch on that. So it is obviously an issue. Jim and I have been in discussions about it for the last couple of weeks, actually, and outside litigation counsel has been engaged. There have been a couple of meetings with TACUS. There's going to be one more later this week, and then Woodlands Water will be pursuing all appropriate legal action from that point forward. And I think I'll just leave it there for purposes of discussion, litigation strategy and open session.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Brian.
This is Director Stromat. I have a question from Brian and maybe Jim. The content gives notice to a developer installs assets ultimately to be purchased by the MUD, and it is dependent, if it is dependent upon the funds coming from a bond sale, then there's no, well, the developer is obligated to wait on the bond sale. He can't press for payment, even though the job is constructed. In paragraph I, paragraph 3 of paragraph I, has the districts ever required a completion bond for a developer to submit along with his proposed construction plans?
This is Brian. When you're asking about a completion bond, I mean, you have to have obviously a payment and performance bond. Those are required by law. Workman's compensation insurance, that's required. Are you talking about a different bond from the payment and performance bond?
No, as long as the performance and payment bond covers the total cost of the whole project.
Which it does, it's for the contract amount.
And that would protect us or protect us from a subcontractor's
This is Brian. That's correct, and that's the
Okay.
purpose. And those are required by law. Yeah,
Thank you
and they're
very
in the
much.
amount of the construction contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any further discussion on agenda item 10? Hearing none, moving along to agenda item 11. Consider an act on modifying how the maximum sewer volume is calculated for water bills issued from February 2021 to February 2022, page 21 of our packets.
I sent out an email following the freeze, notifying the directors that we were in the process of calculating water bills for the February billing. And many, or if not most of our MUDs, we had the meter readings that included water main breaks, freeze breaks inside the homes, plumbing failures. So I took the initiative of calculating that February bill using the same maximum sewer volume that was calculated for the prior year. What we're asking is that we continue to keep that number in place for this current year. That number doesn't change a whole lot from household to household, from year to year. Our sewer volume at the San Jacinto River Authority projections has been kind of flat over the last several years. And remember, we essentially tell the San Jacinto River Authority what sewer volume to bill us for. We read the meters, and that sewer volume is then submitted to them in a total, and that's what they bill us for. So I don't see this as having really any meaningful impact on the district's budgets. And it's the right thing to do, I think, for the customers that experience these plumbing failures due to the freeze. And it's really, I think, a reasonable path forward. And we're recommending that we utilize last year's sewer volume for the remainder of this year.
Jim, this is Mike Wise. I have a quick question. So you're going to do that evenly, that last year's number will be used for everybody, not just the ones that had a broken water line.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is Sandra, and I think it's a wonderful idea, Jim, having been one that lost water.
I'm in agreement. I think that's a good way to go.
Could we please draft a motion for approval? Jim, how would we phrase that? That you just want to use how to calculate water bills based upon last year's sewer volume. Can you
Yeah.
help me with the wording of the
Authorized staff to
motion?
Utilize the February 2020 sewer calculation for the remainder of this year. And then we would recalculate sewer volume in February of 2022.
Okay. Brian, is that sufficient for a motion?
This is Brian. Yes, I think that works.
Thank you. I'd receive, I'll make a motion to approve that, or vote to approve that motion. I will make that motion. How's that?
This is Mike Wise. I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Hearing that, roll call vote. Director Lux, yes. Director Wise,
Yes.
Director Stromat,
Yes.
Director Doherty,
Yes.
Director George.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes unanimously. Agenda item 12, receive information from SJRA staff regarding review of groundwater surface water delivery ratio for FY 2022, pages 22 and 23 of our packets.
Thank you. This is Ron Kelling. Actually, Arthur did a great job of making my presentation. So any questions? Just kidding. As Arthur mentioned, there was a groundwater surface water committee that was formed, and they did a memo. They put together a memo of May of 2020, which is on page 22 of your packet. And it talks about how that an annual basis we will revisit the groundwater surface water delivery ratio. So on page 23 of your packet, we have those calculations. And also just a reminder, and I think Arthur mentioned this also, you remember the aquifer, the well records that we presented in December, where it showed that like water levels were declining. And then when we get to 2016, we start delivering surface water, it flattened out. And that was when we were using 65% surface water, then 50% surface water. And then once we went to 35% surface water, we started declining down. And the subsidence data from the PAM Site 13, which is in the Woodlands, reflects the same information, that we were subsiding at a certain rate, dropping down. Once we started delivering surface water, we flattened out. But once we reduced our surface water rate to 35%, then it started dropping down a little bit. And so what we presented to you is one-page calculation to show that, again, this is fiscal year 21 budget data, or data. This is not based on the 22 data budget that we're working on right now. But if you looked at 2021 and looked at the allocation of 35% surface water to the Woodlands, and actually everybody who receives surface water from the SJRA GRP is at 35% surface water. And you have set a blended rate at $2.88. At that rate, for the average citizen who has 10,000 gallons, it's about $28.80 a month. That's their pass-through of the GRP blended rate. If we were to increase the water, surface water being delivered to the Woodlands outside of that rate to make it a 50% blend, we would need about another 2.5 million gallons a day of surface water. The cost to produce that 2.5 million gallons, just strictly looking at chemicals, power, and a few other items, and cost of water, raw water, it would add another $2.30 a month to everyone's bill who has an average of 10,000 gallons a month, which would make it $31.10. And so I guess the question before the MUDs and the trustees is, does the Woodlands want to increase or pay the extra money to get an increase of about 2.5 MGD of surface water over the year, over the entire year, so that each customer, residential customer that has about 10,000 gallons a month, would pay about $2.30 a month. And we're going to be seeking a guidance from the Woodlands trustees in April, because we're currently working on the budgets and we need to know this information to develop both the GRP budget and the Woodlands Division budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
This is Mike Wise. That 10,000 gallons, though, the average user in the Woodlands, that's going to go up significantly above that in the summertime where you're using your sprinkler system and so forth, correct?
Right. That's average for the year. So yes.
The averages are pretty, rough. Sometimes you can have your 1 foot in ice water and 1 foot in the fire. Your average temperature is pretty good, but you're still not very comfortable.
Correct.
But now outside the Woodlands, and correct me, I'm getting a little foggy here. Everybody else will be using a different blend of surface water and groundwater. Are we the only ones that really do that? My mind's drawing a blank here.
Sure, absolutely.
Like Conroe and the other ones and so forth.
No, you're correct. You're correct. The other 6 who are receiving surface water we would give them the option to use more surface water, but they're more likely not going to take it. But they would be at their 35% surface water blend, 65% groundwater blend. It would just be the Woodlands that would be taking an extra 2.5 million gallons a day in surface water.
I don't know if I try to justify that to all the homeowners that here again, the Woodlands is kind of taking in the shorts for everybody else because nobody else wants to, go down that road. I'm not saying, no, I don't agree with it, but I have some reservations.
Understood. That's why we're bringing it to the MUDs and give y'all a month to kind of discuss it and work with your trustee before we get to next month's trustee meeting.
Director Stromat with a question. If we choose to use more surface water, are we going to can we expect some benefit in reduced subsidence?
We wouldn't, well, let me put it this way. When we were at the 65% blend and we were at the 50% blend, so was Southern Montgomery County Mud, Rayford Road, the people who are around you, okay, along with the Woodlands. And so that leveling off that you saw was a combined effort of not only the Woodlands, but the others who are around you who are taking surface water. If we go to this, they would more than likely not be taking the extra surface water. They would stay at 35%. You would be increasing to 50%. You would see some effect, but I don't know if it would be the same effect as what we saw back in 2016.
Well, in future action of MA14, and if there's some movement with Lone Star, if there is more of a unified effort to use less groundwater, how big a group will it take to show an improvement that the Woodlands could participate in?
The bigger the group around, if you're the donut hole of the donut, it would take more of the donut, more of the people outside of the donut hole to participate. So yes, it would take the other users of Southern Montgomery County Mud, Rayford Road, others who are bringing Oak Ridge North, those are immediately across the street, basically, or I-45 from y'all.
Okay.
I would be a little concerned that ultimately this would take the pressure off for anybody else to want to go to more surface water, because if we see any benefit, I think that lessens the pressure on the other municipalities to go to a bigger percentage of surface water than if we stay where we're at and use all our negotiating power and pressure power to get everybody to come on board with it.
This is a question for Brian. Is there any authority who could cause all these different users who have different goals to come into compliance? Can the state tell us to do what we should be doing to try to control subsidence?
This is Brian. I mean, you know, not to be trite, but I mean, that's really what the purpose of the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District was supposed to be.
So do they control our future in this regard?
This is Brian. Yes, they do.
Wow. Thank you.
Unless there's further, oh, Doherty, Betty, were you ready to say something?
Yeah, I have a question. So if do we need to take action today to vote on the Woodlands? This is just the discussion, right? And then will the trustees do the voting upon the action, or do each MUD have to vote?
That's my, as opposed to anyone else, what my intention was, Betty, was to give you the board a couple of weeks to think about this and then circle back before the Board of Trustees meeting after we've all had kind of a conversation. Obviously, don't want to violate the open meetings laws and all those other things that we have to comply with, but to get a consensus of the board so that when I go to the trustees meeting, I can represent your positions accurately.
And also, if I may add for clarification, also we're trying to figure out is, should we go through the exercise and I would say even pain of developing a new rate that is going to be for somebody who wants more surface water than what they're allocated, and put that in the process, because we're not going to be able to tell you what that rate is, and you're not going to be able to commit to that additional water and that rate until after we tell you what that rate is, and that's going to be a couple of months down the road. So this is not a commitment. Make sure this is not a commitment of any of the Woodlands MUDs that, okay, yeah, we're going to take an extra 2 MGD, 2.5 MGD. It's just a, is this something y'all are interested in? The other thing to note is this is going to have to be unanimous, because we can't have, 6 MUDs say yes, they want a higher blend, and 4 MUDs says they don't, because it's all one blend. So it's going to have to be a pretty unanimous thing. So I don't know if that helps clarify or muddy up the waters.
Well,
And I want to make sure and emphasize what you're looking at today gives you an order of magnitude that it's based on the current rates. We're going to be looking and working with the GRP division. Their rates are likely going to go up based on some feedback from their bonding lawyers or the council overseeing the bonds that were sold, that said we can't continue to not collect money for legal expenses. So once all that's factored in, you're probably going to see somewhat of an increase in what this number actually is, but this gives you an order of magnitude.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. The schedule is that we will present our draft budget to the GRP in April. They will vote on it in May. So we won't know what the rate is even until May. So there's be time to discuss this.
This is Mike again. I would tend to want to, in my opinion, the thought process would be we would need to push a decision on this off I want to see a estimate of rates for the next 10 years or whatever it may be. So I have an idea of 5 years or 10 years, what it's going to be for what we think the rates are going to be. Because you could be signing up for something that is pretty onerous.
Well, this is Ron Kelly. Can I respond to that one? This is just a year-long thing, and so what I mean by that is we can increase the take of an entity in actually at any given time and shut off that take, the additional take at any time. This is not a long-term commitment thing. This is if you want more water in next fiscal year, we'll plan for it. If you decide you do, and then the following year you don't, then we cut it back. So to help you on that, this is not a long-term commitment thing. This is just a, what do you want us to plan for in fiscal year 2022, period, and nothing more. Does that help?
Yeah, it makes me question a little bit too, is it's that easy for them to turn on and off? You know, if we, you know, we'd say we all want more surface water. It seems to me they would do some planning to get more surface water, and then next year we tell them we don't want that surface water. But I hear you, it's not a long-term commitment, but okay.
This
You're on mute. There you go.
I had my public is calling. So let me see if it's incumbent upon this mud and all muds, if we're going to go to more surface water, and the goal of more surface water is to reduce subsidence, what our job is as mud directors is to be sure that our constituency understands why we're doing that, and to affect subsidence would seem to be a pretty important goal, would it not?
Yeah, I would think it's a good goal, but are we gonna affect it by 1 inch? Are we gonna affect it by 1 foot? Are we gonna affect it by, what are we gonna affect it by? Because I would think consistent would want us to know, you know, for signing them up for more money, you know, what benefit are they going to get, or are we all going to get? So there is a lot of discussion needs to be had on it, I think, in my opinion.
I think everything that I've looked at shows, the models show 3 inches over here in the woodland. I mean, 1.5 inches over here in the woodlands, all the way to 3.5 inches as far as Porter. Now, I could have that all wrong, but where I've lived before, 1.5 and 3.5 inches in a piece of property made a big difference. In fact, it was a lot of cracks in the wall. I've just lived in bad places, New Orleans and Jackson, Mississippi. Both places had problems with the earth shifting.
Any further discussion on that matter?
The other thing that I wonder is, does anybody in this group know isn't that what One Water is working on also, in terms of subsidence and groundwater?
One Water, I guess the new direction for the new name of that task force, One Water, is to not only study stormwater, but also study groundwater and surface water and how they all impact each other and blend together. The One Water group is gaining membership, and many of the members coming in are focused more on groundwater than stormwater. Park is now a member, I'm told. Montgomery County Precinct 4, I think, out on the east side of I-45, the Porter, that area will be joining at the next meeting, and they're coming in because they're concerned about the subsidence predictions in their area if groundwater is utilized fully and no surface water. So it's, yeah, it's kind of evolving into a group, a task force that looks at a lot more than just stormwater impacts.
Further discussions? Hearing none, there's no action required, but I will circle back so that I can go to that meeting with a consensus. Thank you for your open dialogue and excellent comments and observations. Agenda item 13, receive information from SJRA Phase 2 Spring Creek Flood Control Dam Feasibility Study Grant Application, page 24 of our packets. Who's going to field that?
I'll start it off, I guess, and Jim will take care of the breakdown. Okay. The interlocal agreements, drafts have been made and circled around. We anticipate that the interlocal agreement with each of the MUDs will be taken to our board in April. And the interlocal agreements could be taken to the MUDs in April or May. Some of the entities like flood control want to see our board adopt it or approve it first before they're willing to consider it. Others may not have that. So you should see it in either April or May. And then we'll be starting later this year.
Additional comments or discussions? Seems like bills are coming at us from every 360 degrees. Need requirements for funds. Further comments on this item? Hearing none, moving along to agenda item 14, the general manager's report. Mr. Stinson, please.
Thank you. I'm going to recap a few items from the trustee meeting. We did have a lengthy discussion regarding the feasibility study for consolidating wastewater treatment operations in the Woodlands. The request, this project was not approved. The RFQ, initiating and reviewing the RFQ and scoring it was not approved at this point. The trustees wanted more information on how and what community engagement stakeholder input may look like. A large part of that request centered around the township, making the township leadership aware of this effort, and bringing that back to the MUDs at next month's meeting. And I have contacted the Woodlands Township, and we have a meeting being set up to sit down with SJRA and Woodlands Water and the township to talk about this concept. So I hope that we can have enough information for the April meeting to have the trustees vote and approve this effort. The San Jacinto River Authority also reviewed their 10-year project plan. That information is available on the Google Drive for you to review. We're looking at somewhere upwards of 180 million to 200 million, I think, over the next 10 years. And just as a reminder, the 10-year plan is looked at every year. So it's each year we get a separate snapshot of what the next 10 years may look like. But the bottom line is we have significant expenses that are going to be incurred over the next 10 years. And we have our audit and budget committee that's been working with the River Authority to see how those expenditures and funds might be financed. We got sidetracked a little bit with that effort when we started looking at wastewater consolidation, but that discussion will resume, and that committee will be bringing back some recommendations to the trustees regarding the funding potential for the 10-year plan. Also in your packet, the Montgomery Central Appraisal District has announced they are taking interest from directors that would like to be on their board serving the special purpose district category. If you're interested in putting your name in the arena for that board position, let us know. I will remind you that the last couple of election seasons, the township has had enough votes to carry their candidate for that position. So just keep that in mind. If you have an interest in running, you'll have a challenge to get enough votes to be seated. Regarding the MUD meetings in person, yeah, it's our recommendation that when we begin meeting in person, that we do it with all the MUDs. It's very difficult to do a kind of a hodgepodge of some MUDs meeting in person and others not. So for consistency purposes, we're looking at either the governor lifting the waiver are getting all the MUDs to agree it's time to start meeting in person again. And I'll be working on collecting that information and reporting it back to you. Also, MCAT has announced that the Texas being declared a natural disaster area, property owners are eligible for the temporary disaster relief on their appraised value. So we may be seeing some homeowners or businesses trying to take advantage of that temporary disaster relief. We have had a director request to see the San Jacinto River Authority SCADA room. It's the room where all the electronic equipment is in place, monitoring the distribution system, kind of the internal electronic brains, if you will. And so we're going to be offering that tour to all MUD directors. Ron and I will be putting together a date and a time and sending that out soon for you to sign up if you're interested in seeing that SCADA room. We're going to be meeting at the request of Lone Star Groundwater District. They've reached out to some stakeholders around the county. They want to talk about subsidence and their management plans. So Eric Hurd has put together a team of elected officials from Woodlands Water to be meeting with the Lone Star Groundwater District. We'll be reporting back on that after that occurs. We're still working with homeowners in 2 neighborhoods that have concerns about the AMI pole installations. I did report to the trustees a number of options for painting or replacing the poles with a camouflage type structure. But I will emphasize that the homeowners in these 2 neighborhoods really feel strongly about having the poles relocated. We haven't completed that analysis, but we continue to work on seeing if there are locations that they can actually be moved away from where they are now and out of sight from others. The TACUS situation, I think we have covered. We are really struggling with that. We've had over 100 water line ruptures, failures, breaks since January 1. The expense is well over $100,000 to our MUDs. So we're going to be working very strongly to get relief in that arena. Also, the Woodlands Water Agency trustees voted to award each MUD a refund from the operating reserve. That breakdown is in your packet. That's a yearly exercise that we look at each March. And this year we had enough reserves to issue a refund back to some MUDs. The HARC monthly report is also in your packet. And I would just point out, we have several compliment letters at the end of the packet. I just will emphasize getting through the February freeze was extremely difficult, hard, especially hard on our field crews, also hard on our in-house staff. The emergency phone line system went down. We had to have people agree to take on phone duty around it from their homes, but it's in our rear view mirror now, and we're going forward, but it was a difficult process to get through.
Is that it, Jim?
Yes.
If I just have one question, this is Director Lux. Can we, on this poll issue, can we expect any, and that's poor choice of words, can we anticipate any unexpected reduction in cost from what was bid as to what we're seeing being invoiced in the AMI project? I mean, would there be any savings from that, or is it a very almost like a time and material bid where, you know, the numbers aren't going to vary much from what was submitted by the contractor and awarded to the contractor?
Regarding these polls at these 2 neighborhoods?
Yeah, just finding somewhere, because these are spectacular numbers, and spectacular in the stunning, not good side. Now, I was just wondering if, because these are AMI project related, at least I believe they are, their need, if there would be another portion of that bid that might have some funds to cover some of these options that were listed.
If I'm understanding the question, no, these would be additional funds that would be needed to accomplish either relocating or camouflaging the poles.
Yeah, I don't think I expressed my question clearly that, but there's no float in those bid or award numbers to what is being constructed and invoiced for.
That is correct. No, this is one price gets it all. Yeah, that's why we went this route. So no, very few change orders, no float. This is here's your price and here's your product.
If this were to proceed forward, even if we went so far as a minimum painting, I mean, that we're still looking at a cash outlay. Now, is this for the total is this the contribution that is required in total? And then how would it be split up by the 10 MUDs?
To be determined. It could either be the MUD that is having the objection could cover that expense, or it could be split between all, to be determined.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Further discussion on that on agenda item 14 and 15?
I have a question, Bob.
Yes, ma'am.
On page 42, the list of stakeholders says they were contacted as of January the 31st. Is that a comprehensive to date? I mean, have there been people added to that list for the Lone Star stakeholder list that they're going to meet with?
What page again, Betty?
I think
42 of our agenda book.
I don't think this has got anything to do with SJRA.
Yeah, those are stakeholders that have been identified by HARC related to the groundwater research consortium. And it is a evolving list. These are the current ones, but we as a consortium, we meet every quarter and offer additional stakeholders to be included to this list.
Thank you. I'm easily confused.
Aren't we all? Okay.
Yeah,
So
and those are the stakeholders that were contacted. I will tell you, the stakeholder list is bigger than that. We've asked that Senator Brandon Creighton, Senator Will Metcalf, Representative Metcalf, several of our elected officials be contacted and added to that stakeholder list so they can be in the loop of what's going on.
I have one final question on the AMI polls. I assume that no action is going to be taken. Do we discuss this and some kind of approval is put in place that this money is not going to be spent? Do we discuss it further, correct?
That is correct.
Thanks.
that completes discussion on items up to 15. Item 16, consider an act on authorizing development agreements, design advertisements for bids, construction contracts, and/or change orders by developers on behalf of the district, acceptance of facilities and/or easements, site conveyances from developers, and receive additional updates. Mike, I believe that's been yours in the past. Is that accurate, or is that yours, Jim?
It could be either, but we don't have any today.
We should have told me that before I'd read all that.
I think I've talked to Shelley. I'm going to review with Brian that we take that item off of the Mud District agendas unless we have something that needs to be acted on.
Excellent. Thank you. Agenda item 7, discuss any matters for placement on future agendas. I personally don't have anything. Director Stromat, Director Wise?
No.
Director Doherty?
No.
Director George?
No.
Okay, good. So I guess we come to the most look forward to agenda item number 18, adjournment of the meeting. Thank you very much for a terrific meeting, well thought out, well presented, and see you soon. Thanks for your help.
All right, good day to all.
Good day to all.
Today.
Bye.